He yelled at her like she was nothing. Her calm reply? It shook every soul in the room. It was barely 6:45 a.m. when Bradley Denham's black Escalade rolled up the curved driveway of his estate in Lake Elmo, Minnesota. The air still carried the bite of dawn, dew clinging to the manicured hedges that lined the front steps. His driver barely had time to stop before Bradley opened the door himself, phone in hand, barking orders to someone on the other end. "No delays. We close today or I walk. You got that?" Bradley didn't wait for a response. He ended the call with a thumb and headed toward the front door of the house he technically owned, but rarely slept in. He spent most of his nights in penthouses and boardrooms, rarely visiting the lakefront estate except when he needed to impress someone or escape headlines. Today was different. He wanted privacy and silence. A multi-million-dollar land acquisition in Colorado Springs was teetering. 2 investors had flown in to finalize the deal. The pitch meeting was set for 8 o'clock sharp. In his study, not at some downtown tower. Bradley thought it might make things feel more personal, strategic. He needed control. As he stepped inside, briefcase in one hand, phone back to his ear, Bradley paused. Something felt off. The living room looked lived in. Not a mess exactly, but far from his standard. The gray throw pillows on the sectional weren't aligned. A single coffee mug, stained and half full, rested on the glass table. The floor looked freshly mopped, but unevenly, and that smell, bleach, faint but sharp, like someone had tried to scrub something fast. Bradley's brow creased. His jaw tightened. He called out, not loudly, but with irritation already in his tone. "Marcia?" A pause. Then, from down the hall, he heard her voice. "In here, Mr. Denham." It came from the sunroom. Bradley exhaled sharply and moved toward her voice. He found her standing near the windows, yellow gloves on, holding a spray bottle and cloth. The sunlight caught the streaks she'd missed on the glass. Marcia Tisdale. Been with the Denham family over 2 decades, hired when his twin daughters were still in braces. Reliable, quiet, efficient. She'd never been a problem. Until now, apparently. He didn't say good morning. "You were supposed to be done by 6, he said flatly, stepping into the room. Marcia turned to face him, unbothered, calm. "Almost done. I stayed a little longer to finish the windows. One of the little ones must have had peanut butter on their hands. Prints everywhere." Bradley looked past her, scanning the streaks. "That's not the point." He turned, walked back into the living room, pointing at the mug. "What is this? My guests will be here in less than an hour, and this place looks like a Motel 6. Were you even finished vacuuming?" Marcia followed him in, gloves still on, standing straight but not defensive. "I vacuumed last night, sir, and I was going to—" "Clearly not well," he cut in, raising his voice now. "This is unacceptable, Marcia. I don't care how long you've been here. If I wanted casual, I'd hire a temp agency." Her eyes stayed on him, calm but firm. "I came at 5 this morning to make sure your house was ready," she said slowly. "I've been up since 3. Drove in before the sun came up. Also, you could have a clean place to sit in while you make your deals." Bradley's executive assistant, Jordan Hanley, appeared just inside the hallway holding a leather folder. She froze when she saw them. Behind her, 2 sharply dressed men, both out-of-towners, paused, looking mildly amused and slightly uncomfortable. But Bradley didn't care. He had steam to let off. "Do you know how many zeros are on the line today, Marcia?" he snapped. "This isn't just about streaks or pillows. It's about showing people we're serious. That this isn't some rundown cabin in the woods. This house, my name, deserves better." He didn't expect her to talk back, and at first she didn't. She just pulled off her gloves, one at a time, and dropped them into the small plastic bin at her feet. Then she looked at him, not like an employee, not like someone afraid of losing a job, like someone who knew exactly who she was. But before Bradley could turn and dismiss her, she said one sentence that stopped the air in the room cold. "Mr. Denham," Marcia said quietly, but not weakly, "if my work was good enough to raise your children, it should be good enough to keep your house clean." She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stood there, holding her posture like she had nothing to prove. The words hung in the air like smoke after a small explosion. Nobody spoke. Bradley stared at her, his mouth halfway open, lips parted as if mid-rebuttal, but the words didn't come. Behind him, Jordan looked down, flipping through the folder in her hands, as if suddenly fascinated by paper. The two investors, one tall and pale, the other shorter with a beard, glanced at each other, unsure if they were watching a meltdown or a moment. The silence went on too long. And still, Marcia stood there. It wasn't just the sentence. It was the weight behind it. 23 years of birthdays, holidays, school drop-offs, late-night fevers. The stain on the hallway carpet from when one of the girls spilled red punch during a slumber party. Marcia had been the one scrubbing it for hours, while Bradley was off on a business trip. She wasn't just the help. She had history in this house. She was part of the fabric. Bradley blinked, his voice low now. "That's not what this is about." "Isn't it?" Marcia asked, her tone still measured. "Because it feels like you're not seeing what's here. You're seeing what's missing. You're looking at a pillow out of place and pretending it means I don't care." Bradley felt the sting rise in his face, not anger, but shame, though he'd never admit it. Jordan finally stepped in, trying to shift the tension. "Mr. Denham, I have the printouts for the meeting. We can set up in the study." He waved her off, but his voice was softer now. "Yeah, in a minute." One of the investors cleared his throat. "We can step outside until you're ready." Bradley turned toward them quickly. "No need. We'll start on time." But they'd already made their way to the patio, giving the impression they'd rather be anywhere else than caught in someone else's family business. Marcia bent down slowly to pick up her cleaning caddy. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. As she passed Bradley, she paused beside him. "I don't expect thanks, Mr. Denham," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "But I do expect decency. I raised girls in this house who knew how to say good morning. You might want to try it." Then she walked down the hallway, her shoes squeaking just slightly on the polished hardwood. Bradley stood there, still as stone. He couldn't decide if he was more embarrassed by her words or the fact that she was right. But when he finally turned around, Jordan wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the floor, like she didn't want to see what came next. Bradley didn't say anything for a full minute. He just stood in the center of his own living room, trying to figure out why her words had cut so deep. He'd had people shout at him in boardrooms. Clients threatened to sue. He'd even been cussed out by a senator once. None of that stuck. But Marcia? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. And somehow, she still managed to hit him right between the ribs. Jordan finally broke the stillness. "I'll tell the caterers to delay the refreshments. Give us a little breathing room." Bradley shook his head slowly. "No, we're fine. Meeting starts in 15. His voice sounded firm again, but it felt hollow, like he was reading from a script he didn't write. He walked toward the hallway without looking back, heading for the study, but instead of turning left, he paused by the family room. The place hadn't changed much in 20 years. The same wood floors, the same oversized fireplace mantel. Even the wall clock, ticking softly, was the same one his ex-wife had picked out when they bought the house in '02. There were photos on the shelf, some old, some newer, family pictures he rarely looked at. His eyes landed on one frame, just slightly crooked, probably from Marcia dusting that morning. It was his daughter's high school graduation, both in blue gowns, standing between their parents. Bradley was smiling. His ex-wife, Camille, had that rehearsed smile she wore for formal events. And right behind them, almost hidden in the background, was Marcia, half cut off by the edge of the frame, holding a tissue in one hand. She had cried that day. He remembered. Back then, she used to bake cookies before their exams, remind them to take their allergy meds. Once even stayed overnight when both girls had the flu and Camille was out of town. Marcia had slept on the couch, and now, after all that, he'd just yelled at her over a mug and a few pillows. Bradley ran a hand through his graying hair. For a second, he thought about going after her, apologizing. But that would mean admitting something, and admitting anything meant losing control. Instead, he walked into the study and closed the door behind him. Inside, Jordan was already laying out the documents on the long oak table. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked up at him once, not with judgment, just hesitation. He cleared his throat. "Let's make this quick. I've got another call at 10. Jordan nodded and went back to arranging the contracts. Meanwhile, out on the patio, the two investors lit cigars. They didn't mention the argument, but they didn't have to. People notice things, especially things you're hoping they forget. Across the house, Marcia sat on the small bench in the mudroom. Her caddy sat by her feet, gloves draped over the edge. She was staring at her hands, calloused from years of bleach, dust, and hard scrubbing. She wasn't upset. Not exactly. She was just tired. Tired of being the background in other people's lives. Tired of being someone people only noticed when something wasn't perfect. She'd worked here longer than most executives had lasted in Bradley's firm, and yet, the first time he really looked at her in months was to accuse her. She pulled out her flip phone, scrolled to the message from her granddaughter. "Grandma, can you come to my recital Friday?" She hadn't answered yet. She leaned her head back against the wall and exhaled slowly. But back in the study, Bradley couldn't stop glancing at the door, like a man who just realized the house he built might not stand as tall as he thought. Long before the sleek floors and glass conference tables, before the estate even had a wine cellar or a saltwater pool, there was just the house. And Marcia. She started working for the Denham family when Camille was still hanging her own curtains and Bradley still mowed the lawn himself on weekends. Their twin daughters, Savannah and Brinley, were barely 9 years old the first time Marcia showed up in her navy blue uniform, holding a sponge bucket and a zip-up Bible in her bag. It was supposed to be a temporary job. Just a stop while she figured out what was next after leaving her job at the school district in St. Paul. She stayed 23 years. At first, Camille didn't know what to make of her. Marcia wasn't one for small talk. She moved quietly, like she belonged, even when she didn't. But it didn't take long for Camille to realize Marcia didn't just clean. She paid attention. One afternoon, Camille had a migraine and forgot to pick up the girls from school. Marcia went herself. Didn't wait for permission. Just got in her car and went. She kept a small notebook in her apron pocket, jotting down grocery needs, allergy reminders, birthdays. No one asked her to. She just did it. Years passed. Bradley's firm exploded in size. Camille left. The girls graduated. But Marcia stayed. She watched the family morph around her. New girlfriends, new priorities, new money. But her hands stayed steady. Every holiday table set with precision. Every surface spotless. Every room echoing her care, even if no one mentioned it. And yet, there were moments, small cracks, when she felt it. The gap. Not just between wealth and paycheck, but between presence and acknowledgement. She wasn't family, but she wasn't a stranger either. She was just there. Until today. Until Bradley's voice came down like thunder in front of strangers, erasing all those years with a few careless sentences. Marcia sat outside on the back steps now, arms crossed, the warm sun hitting her shoulders. She didn't smoke, but she understood why people did. Sometimes you just needed to hold something in your hands to keep from falling apart. She looked out at the lake. It shimmered like glass, quiet, almost too quiet. That's when she heard the screen door creak open behind her. She didn't turn. "Marcia," came Jordan's voice. She turned slightly, eyes meeting the younger woman's. Jordan walked over and sat beside her, holding a to-go coffee cup. "You okay?" she asked, handing it to her. "I'm fine," Marcia said, taking the cup but not sipping. "You know how it is." Jordan looked at her, then away. "I don't, actually. Not like that." Marcia didn't reply. Jordan took a breath. "I've worked for Mr. Denham 5 years. Seen him chew through vendors, fire a man for bringing the wrong brand of bottled water, cuss out a broker during a dinner party. But I've never seen him look like that." "Like what?" "Like he knew he was wrong and couldn't undo it." Marcia smirked, barely. "Guilt doesn't pay overtime." Jordan laughed, soft. "No. But sometimes it makes people stop long enough to feel it." They sat in silence for a while, just the sound of birds and the occasional hum of a boat engine far off across the water. Jordan stood. "Meeting's almost done. I'll let you know when they leave." Marcia nodded. "Thanks, baby." Jordan hesitated. "I think he'll try to talk to you." "I'm sure he will." "Are you gonna let him?" Marcia looked down at her hands again. "I don't know yet." But upstairs in the study, Bradley was doing something he hadn't done in years, listening instead of speaking. By the time the investors left, it was past 10. The sun had climbed higher over the lake, and the sharp morning glare now flooded the study through the wide pane windows. Bradley watched them get into the rental car without shaking hands. No cigars this time. No closing jokes. They'd sat through the meeting politely, asked questions, took notes. But the tone had changed. Something in the room had shifted. It wasn't about the numbers anymore. It was about him. He saw it in the way the shorter man, Griffin, the one with the beard, looked at him like he was trying to gauge what kind of man he really was, past the suit and the net worth. As they drove off, Jordan stepped back into the room. "They said they'll circle back by the end of the week," Bradley scoffed. "That's code for, we're not impressed." She didn't confirm or deny. He moved to the window again, his arms crossed tight against his chest. "You think I handled it wrong?" Jordan shrugged. "Does it matter what I think?" "Yes." "Then yeah," she said without flinching. "You did." Bradley turned to her. "I didn't hire her to raise my kids. That wasn't in the job description. Neither was saving your daughter's prom dress from wine stains at midnight, or sitting in the ER when Brinley broke her arm and you couldn't be reached, or helping Savannah write her college application essay when Camille was in Italy." Bradley's mouth twitched slightly. "She told you all that?" "No, the girls did," Jordan said. "Over the years, in bits, in stories. They still text her on birthdays." That surprised him. He sat down heavily in the armchair across from the fireplace. "I don't know what came over me," he admitted. "You do," Jordan said gently. "You were stressed. You needed someone to blame." Bradley rubbed the side of his face. "She just looked at me like she knew me better than I know myself. Maybe she does." He didn't answer. Jordan continued, careful with her tone. "You're not a monster, Mr. Denham. But sometimes, when people get used to being in control, they stop noticing the hands that helped hold things up." He looked up at her. "You're saying I forgot she's human?" "I'm saying you forgot she's more than just a name on your payroll." Bradley was quiet for a long time. He watched the light bounce off the marble floors. He thought about the photos in the hallway, about the graduation, about the smell of cookies that used to fill the kitchen when the girls were still home. "I should talk to her." Jordan gave a slight nod, then left the room. Bradley sat there, the walls suddenly feeling too clean, too quiet. The house didn't feel like his anymore. It felt like a showroom, a polished glass box. And maybe for the first time, he realized just how fragile it really was. Outside, Marcia was still on the back steps, her arms folded now, the sun warming the top of her shoulders. She'd almost left earlier, almost got in her car and drove off, but something made her stay. Maybe she was waiting for something, or someone. But even if Bradley finally opened his mouth to say what needed to be said, the question was, would Marcia still care enough to listen? The back door opened quietly. Bradley stepped out, alone. No phone, no folder, no one behind him telling him what to say. Marcia didn't move. She didn't turn. She just took another sip from the now lukewarm coffee Jordan had brought her earlier and kept her eyes on the lake. Bradley stood there awkwardly for a second, then sat on the bench next to her, leaving space between them, but not too much. "I didn't mean to come at you like that," he started. Marcia didn't answer. Not right away. He tried again. "What I said earlier, it wasn't right. I know that." Still nothing. She waited. Let him sit with it. So he did. "I was under pressure. Investors. Closing deal. I got in my head." "Uh-huh," Marcia said, not even looking at him. He looked down at his hands. Same hands that signed checks, shook governors' hands, held deals together with sheer will. But now they looked like they didn't know what to do. "I've said worse to people I barely know," he muttered. "But you know me," she finally said. That hit different. It landed heavy. He turned to her. "That's the part that bothers me." "It should," she said simply. They sat in silence again. The wind picked up a little, rustling the leaves on the tree overhead. A boat engine buzzed somewhere in the distance. "You remember the time Savannah called you from the dorm at 2 a.m, Marcia asked. Bradley nodded slowly. "She had food poisoning." "I stayed on the phone with her all night," Marcia said. "She wouldn't call Camille, and she didn't want to bother you." "She never told me that." "Most things your daughters told me, they didn't tell you," Marcia said, still calm. "Not because you were a bad father, but because you were never really there." He blinked. "I provided." "I know, and they're grateful. But you didn't see them grow up. I did. I was there for the first heartbreaks, the college acceptance letters, the panic attacks, all of it." Bradley looked down, jaw tight. "I thought I was doing the right thing, working hard, building something." "You were," she said, But when people give all their time to work, someone else ends up raising their family. She didn't say it with judgment, just truth. I never thanked you for any of that, Bradley said after a while. Marcia turned her head to look at him for the first time. No, she said. You didn't. He nodded. Thank you. She didn't reply right away, just gave a slow nod, let the words land. I was wrong this morning, he added. I can't take it back, but I can say that much. Marcia exhaled, then stood up and picked up her cleaning caddy. I don't need flowers, Mr. Denham. I don't need a raise or a plaque. I just need to be treated like a person. You are. I wasn't this morning. He stood too. Then I'll do better. She paused at the steps. I don't know if I'll stay, Bradley, she said. It was the first time she'd used his first name since the girls were in high school. He nodded slowly. I'd understand if you didn't. She turned back to him. But if I do, she continued, this house is going to look different. What do you mean? I mean, it's time someone stopped treating it like a showroom and started treating it like a home again. She walked back inside without waiting for a response. But for the first time in years, Bradley didn't see her as someone who just worked for him. He saw her as the one person who held his family together long after it had already fallen apart. 3 weeks passed. Bradley hadn't seen Marcia since that morning on the bench. She didn't quit, but she also didn't show up the next day, or the day after. She sent a short message through Jordan, taking time off, thinking. Bradley didn't press. For once he knew better. He cleaned up after himself for the first time in years, loaded the dishwasher, attempted to mop the kitchen floor, and ended up calling Jordan to ask how to mix the solution. He hated how useless he felt. But in that quiet, something started to shift. One Friday afternoon, he showed up, unannounced, at the church on Kellogg Avenue in St. Paul, a small building with peeling white paint and a faded blue door. Marcia's name wasn't on the sign, but Jordan had told him this was where her granddaughter's recital would be. He sat in the back, alone, watching from behind rows of proud parents and wiggling kids. Marcia was near the front, dressed in her Sunday best, hair done, proud smile across her face as her granddaughter played a wobbly but passionate version of Amazing Grace on a violin that looked too big for her. Marcia didn't know he was there. He left before it ended. A few days later, she showed up at the estate. Same uniform, same quiet strength. Bradley was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pouring himself coffee when she walked in. He turned, caught off guard. You came back, he said. I didn't come back for you, she said flatly. I came back for me. He nodded. Fair. She set her bag down. I'm not picking up where we left off, she added. If I'm staying, there are conditions. He pulled out a stool. I'm listening. No yelling, no snapping fingers, no pretending I don't exist until you need something. You want a clean house? I'll do that. But I'm not your shadow. You never were, he said. I just treated you like one. She tilted her head slightly, watching him. I saw you at the recital, he admitted. She raised an eyebrow. You didn't say anything. Wasn't my moment. She nodded slowly, almost approving. Bradley took a breath. I've been thinking a lot. About the house, the girls, Camille, you, everything. That's new. It is, he admitted. He walked to the side counter, picked up a small white envelope, and handed it to her. She hesitated, opened it. Inside was a printed letter, typed, with a signature, an official offer. Foundations and Families, the letterhead read, a nonprofit grant for community caretakers, full funding for Marcia's home cleaning business, her own. She looked up at him. I had a meeting with the board last week. We're starting a small initiative for people who've carried others for too long without anyone ever carrying them back. Her mouth tightened slightly, then softened. You did this? I just signed the check. The idea came from watching someone work harder than anyone I know and never ask for credit. She folded the letter slowly, tucked it back into the envelope. Are you asking me to leave? No, he said. I'm asking you to have options. Marcia didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Her silence said more than words ever could. She glanced around the kitchen. The counters were wiped, though not perfectly. The trash had been taken out, but the bin was crooked. She looked back at him. First thing we fix is those pillow placements in the living room. They still look like a teenager arranged them. Bradley cracked the first real smile in weeks. Yes, ma'am. She smirked. Don't push it. As she walked off to start her day, Bradley stood still for a moment. The house didn't feel like a showroom anymore. It felt lived in, real, respected, maybe even redeemed. And sometimes, the most valuable thing a man can own isn't land or title, but the ability to recognize when he's wrong and do something about it. Because real power isn't in who speaks the loudest. It's in who's still standing when the shouting stops. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, respect isn't earned through status. It's shown through action.